I can't hear you guys.
Because we're being quiet.
Ah. Jeez.
Do it.
Time for the call to order. Yeah, I'm Kingston Cole, Chair of the Citizens Oversight Committee for Marin Wildfire, and I'm calling this meeting of May 22nd, 2024 to order. Would you, Martina, please call the roll call?
Jenny Biggs. Jennifer Howard.
Here.
Pat Randolph. Larry Chu. Here. John McCauley.
Here.
Spencer CS. Kingston Cole.
Here.
Larry Minikis. Rebecca Suggs.
And if I could just share with the buttons, it's not a push and hold and talk. It's push, get the green light, talk, then push, the green light goes out.
Item number 3, agenda adjustments. Do we have any agenda adjustments?
I have a small one on the board monitoring reports. There was also a finance committee meeting. Wasn't very long, but I was there. So if you'd like, I can report on that. Okay.
Larry Minikis?
Last meeting, I had an agenda item which would be to review our monthly meetings and whether we wanted to change that schedule. We can't do it this week.
Well, we canceled the last meeting, so we got a break. So, yeah, we'll take that up. I'll talk to Mark about it. Okay.
Oh, sorry. I saw the red light. I thought it was on.
Any other agenda adjustments? Okay. Item number 4, open time for public expression. The public is welcome to address the Citizens Oversight Committee at this time on matters not on the agenda that are within the jurisdiction of the committee. Please be advised that pursuant to Government Code Section 54954.2, the committee is not permitted to discuss or take action in any matter not on the agenda. Comments may be no longer than 3 minutes, and we should be respectful to the community. My computer just went out. Please silence your cell phones during the meeting. Mute your microphone when not reporting out. Martina, do we have any public comments?
We have no hands raised at this time.
Oh, Josh, you're doing it. You're Martina today. Okay, great. All right. All right. And item number 5, executive officers report. Mark.
Good afternoon, everybody. Long time since I've been able to attend one of your meetings. My apologies for that. And then we had last month's canceled due to lack of attendance, so apologies for that. As you know, Marin Wildfire staff has been very busy over the last several months getting the work plan and the budget past the finish line, which we did on May 16th. So that lift is over, but now it is preparing the final document, getting the last minute edits, like no last names over certain places or adding this or that here and there. And then also creating an executive summary of the work plan is in progress. As far as a fire season update, if you guys saw the board meeting, I showed a display that comes from Northern Region Intel office up in Reading, where they do an annual or actually a quarterly report of expected fire behavior, mostly centered around the possibility of fires becoming major fires. And they base it on average, below average, or above average. And so for May, we're looking at average, which means not much chance anyway. For June and July, they're listing the chance of catastrophic fire as being below average, which is good news for us. But when we get into August, it's back to average, which is not necessarily good. And given who knows what's going to happen between now and September, October, when it's really important, I bet you there will be areas of the state that will start getting to above average for the chance of catastrophic fire. And as you'll hear some reports from the ATC ops and finance, a lot of in-depth conversations, both in public meetings and also at our ad hoc subcommittees. Quite frankly, I think the member agencies and their representatives did a really good job of challenging each other and saying, is this the best project? Is this the best product that we can bring forward to the board? Those conversations were respectful but challenging, which is a good thing. Instead of just taking the road to Aberdeen and taking the path of least resistance, people pushed hard for what they thought was right for Marin Wildfire. And we will be having a follow-up meeting with the ad hoc subcommittee of operations on July 8th, just to really rehash the conversations that we had and make sure that, because a lot of the challenging conversations are conversations that are happening each year. And we have changes of faces sometimes. And so this is going to be really, all right, let's get us together and decide this is how we are going to be functioning as 17 member agencies with 3 committees for each agency. Because, with 17 people in ATC, 17 people at ops, 17 people on board, there's not always streamlined communication between all those 3. So that's what we're going to be working on July 8th. And with that, I'll take any questions.
I have a couple of questions. I think one anyway. How far in advance do we get forecasts of severity? I mean, we know now through May, June, July.
The North Office Intel Shop usually will forecast out 4 months. So in a month, we'll start seeing September lighten up and so on.
I don't
Just-
really have another question, but I have a comment. Since so much is happening in ad hoc committees, which makes perfect sense, so I'm not challenging that. But I find it really helpful to develop this understanding that all of the questions that I might have are actually going on in those meetings, even if they're difficult. So I just appreciate the robustness of those conversations.
And the ad hocs have been trying to do a good job when they come back to the full committee to express what the general conversation was and what the end decision was. So I hope it's been transparent. I mean, and I think you guys know that when you have 17 people in a room, it's really hard to get everybody together. So it really is important to have the ad hoc subcommittees really dig deep and then share out to the rest of the committee.
Thought that was on silence. I guess it wasn't.
Are we still live? All right. Is that any other comments?
Okay, I like football.
Moving right along.
It's weird.
Consent calendar. The opportunity for public comment on consent agenda items will occur prior to the committee's discussion of the consent agenda. The committee may approve the entire consent agenda with one action, and the alternative items on the consent agenda may be removed by any committee or staff member for separate discussion and vote. Josh, do we have any public comment?
No hands raised.
Committee? Any adjustments, changes? Larry?
Yeah, I'd already provided the information to Mark and he acknowledged he'll change it, but what's out there on the website shows that the minutes of March 27th, we approved the minutes of March 27th. I think it was meant to be February 24th.
Good.
And we'll make that adjustment.
Pat?
I have one that I meant to get to Martina ahead of time, but on the bottom of page 2, and by the way, these were excellent minutes. So congratulations to you, Martina. But she used the word descriptive, and I think descripted, and I think described is a much more commonly used word. So I would suggest switching descripted to described. Other than that, everything's great.
So White and Sistrunk, okay. Do we have any other adjustments, recommendations? Do I have a motion to accept the minutes subject to the,
I motion to accept the minutes for March 27th, 2024.
okay. We have a roll
Friendly
call.
amendment.
So do we have a second? You,
Oh, friendly amendment. Kingston,
sorry?
a friendly amendment,
Sure,
as amended.
as amended, right. Thank you. Thank you, Larry.
Yeah,
Right.
I'll second that.
Maybe we have a roll call, please.
Jenny Biggs,
Yes.
Jennifer Howard,
Yes.
Pat Randolph,
Yes.
Larry Chu,
Yes,
John McCauley,
Yes.
Kingston Cole,
Yes,
Larry Minikis, Rebecca Suggs.
Yes.
all right, so the minutes are approved as amended, friendly and otherwise. So, moving on, 7, board monitoring reports, ATC.
I think I'm deferring to Jennifer. Is that true? Since ATC and ops are invariably the same, you only need to hear from one of us.
We talked about swapping since she always went first and then I just said whatever she said. But Jenny and I have talked about swapping. You want to report on ops?
Yeah, I'm happy to go on ops. Just for anybody who didn't already see it. So program manager's report was plugging the field trip on May 6th and also pointing to the public facing map, the interactive clickable map for vegetation management, which I think was set to go live at any point. I looked today and I haven't found it yet, but it's probably coming
We're
soon.
targeting end of May.
End of May. So clickable polygons for people to be able to see, publicly accessible. But really the majority of the conversation was around the 2024-2025 work plan, with unanimous approval. So as Mark had already said, it went ahead to the board and conversation around really thinking about how the data-driven science-informed strategy for the 20% and otherwise can be something that's talked about in the July 8th meeting. So that was really the crux of it. And I don't know about ATC, if there were additional pieces that were separate.
That would be for Rebecca.
Questions? Public comment?
There are no hands raised at this time.
I was going to say I could just add to this as a co-op report. Do you want, or should I make a separate TC report?
Only if you have something to add. It can still be cooperative.
I think cooperative is cool. I'll just add that there was quite a bit of discussion around what to do with the 20% out of the 60% that they were going to allot to priority projects, and apparently have been having difficulty doing that. So there was discussion, both ATC and ops, about what to do with that and how to do it.
And if you guys want a little bit more detail on what pushed us away from using the modeling for those decisions. And Dan Schwartz is the one that spoke up loud and clear in an operations committee. Hey, Mark and team, do you guys have the tools to use science to prioritize that 20%? And we ended up having about a 3-day turnaround to be able to process that. And we used it through the evacuation ingress egress risk assessment. And those of you who've done any type of process like this, the result often depends on the questions that you're asking the process. So the way we asked the question through our modeling came out with some very distinctly different answers than we expected. And so we felt that the process was A, too short to be able to ask the right questions, and B, our modeling at this point is probably a little bit too immature. And that's part of what the July 8th is, to bring enough tools together and also figure out what are the right questions to ask so that we can get the results that actually make the most sense. Another thing is that we only used one of our tools, and that was the evacuation ingress egress risk assessment. Whereas in the future, we're going to be able to use evac ingress egress risk assessment, our dynamic risk assessment that we're doing both for on property and for shaded fuel breaks, and a couple Ladris artificial intelligence modeling that, and a company called Vibrant Planet has a different way of looking at all these models. And this is going to allow us to put all these models and overlay them and see where there's agreement within the models. And then where there's agreement, that's where we can start using that for prioritized funding. So that we just felt it was too immature, and it really wasn't painting a picture that made sense to folks that have been fighting fire in Marin for a long time.
And that what they decided to do, correct me if I'm wrong, Mark, they're going to refund the 20% back to the zones.
That is correct.
Yeah.
Jennifer?
This is just curiosity, but so if the results are dependent on the questions, are you working together to develop them then?
Yes, and that's what a lot of the July 8th meeting will be, is to set the stage for that. And then we will be putting together a working group of both ops and ATC to develop that standardized approach and figure out what the questions are. It won't all be solved at July 8th, but we'll convene a working group to build those questions, build the process, and how we're going to analyze it.
So just processing for myself, that means you really have until you have to develop the next work plan.
And that's why we're starting now, because it's going to take time.
Yeah, no, this sounds great.
Any other comments? Josh, do we need a roll call on this to accept the report?
No.
Okay. Operations Committee, report.
That was a blend of ops and ATC together.
Okay, fine. Okay. Item 8,
Do you want to do finance and board?
it's not on the agenda.
We mentioned that at the beginning where I said that we had the meetings.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
if that's Hoyle, that's
Yeah,
proper.
It says the overall agenda item says board
Right.
meetings, so I
Right.
think we're good, Brown Act wise.
Kind of what I thought too, yeah. So the meeting was on May 6th. It was 18 minutes long. All the video and audio worked, so we could actually hear it this time. The 50,000 foot version of it, Mark pointed out that spend to date in this last cycle is up over prior years, which is a good thing because we're getting caught up with our backlog, because we're about $1 million higher. They're expecting maybe 24, 25 that you might be caught up. So keep an eye on that. Don't get over your skis, but it's good news that money's getting put to work. There was discussion about the D-space abatement holdback and how that has not been effective. And there's 240 grand, I think, hung up in there, and it's going to go to the board to possibly revise and remove that item. And then finally, something which I actually agree with based on the work we were doing in local, there's a lot of confusion about the accounting for the rollover mechanism and how it's displayed on the document. It's not very clear. And the staff is going to work on making it a little more obvious, like this is what was spent cumulatively and budgeted cumulatively. This is the rollover coming in. This is what we're spending this year. And this is where the rollover is at the end. We would call it as an accountant, the 10K format. So you'll tighten that up. So that was what I heard in the 18 minutes.
Questions? Public comment?
None at this time.
Is there any public, by the way? Okay, good.
Any
I was just
follow-
going to add that John was able to get our 18-minute meeting compressed into about 45 seconds.
What I do.
Any other discussion on that item? No. Okay. Next, we move on to,
So board meeting?
annual report committees. Oh, I'm sorry. Did you have something?
Yeah, the board met too. So the report on the board meeting, the most important thing obviously was the approval of the work plan. Of somewhat interest to Kathleen Cutter and Dave Glenn, who was a battalion chief for Kentfield Fire. Is that correct? are now both employees of Marin Wildfire, where Kathleen had been an employee of Ross Valley. And, bringing that group, which is growing each year, under the tent of Marin Wildfire rather than having it housed elsewhere. I think that's really, that hasn't already been mentioned in the finance report, the heart of it. So
Questions from the committee? Public comment?
Not at this time.
Any additional discussion? Okay, any other? We've got the board, the executive committee. What happened to them? Okay, all right. All right, I'll be safe and say, I think we can move on to item 8. Annual report committees. Okay, local.
So we had our first meeting. It was very productive. The Larrys and I met with Mark and we went through a bunch of questions. We spent a good afternoon on it. Larry Chu was kind enough to kind of record minutes of it. I left the next day and literally got back like Sunday night. So I haven't had a chance to do much on it yet, but in the next week or so, I'll try to draft, put things a little closer together, and then we'll get together and move the ball forward. So we've gone from first place to last place now because you guys all have documents, but we will get our act in order soon. So, and it's probably premature to comment on what our observations are until we've collectively agreed. So,
Questions? No, they can't be many. Okay, public comment.
Larry?
I'm sorry. Excuse me.
Yeah, if I were to add to that, that's what the paper is here that was left. We didn't submit it for the agenda. But what you have here is a summary of our discussion for each of the 5 agencies that were reviewed. And it's on 2 sides. So on the first page, you'll see that Stinson Beach actually rolls over to the second page. We subsequent to our discussion, you'll notice a comment here that San Rafael, had not submitted the information they were required to Mark and his staff. And they have now, but what it looks like when I look at that spreadsheet is a big, huge dump of their time logs, like individual timesheets almost. And, I don't know how you're going to go through that to determine whether they're in compliance or not, but I think they could have come up with a better way to do that.
I agree. And I know that Alicia Schiffman has been spending many, many hours both with San Rafael Fire and Marin County Fire on the D-Space side, working through the complicated budget sheets. And I have to say that I already have, without even you guys being able to report out on it, have already been thinking based on the conversation with the 2 Larrys and John, we've already started making some tweaks so that we can make this process better.
And just to add, the spreadsheet that's in front of you is broken down by agency. I didn't put a color code key on it, but it's listed somewhere in there. I got SR for San Rafael in the first column or the second column. But the things that still need to be filled in is just going back through and getting the rollovers from previous years so that we can tack on the last fiscal year, and then that information can be used to go forward with this fiscal year. And that's it.
Questions?
Yes. Hand is raised.
Right, go ahead, Rebecca.
Thanks. What document were you looking at? Is that something that's online?
I'll forward it to you, Rebecca.
Thanks.
Any other questions? Public comment?
No public comment.
Any follow-up? Okay. D-Space report.
If somebody's, thanks.
Okay, yeah, thank you. the San Rafael D-Space, and interestingly enough, I was having lunch today and ran into Kate Anderson and Quinn Gardner also having lunch. But I did not tell them what was on the agenda. But I tweaked this just a little bit between the two meetings because as I read over it, there were a thing or two that wasn't as clear as I wanted it to be. But if anybody has any questions, and then we have the Jennifer and Jenny talk to Mark about Marin County Fire. So they have that part.
I think it's clear to everybody that we divided the areas that we decided to look into. And so I think the only thing I can add to this document is that I've learned from Mark that Marin County Fire is actually deeply into doing exactly what addressing one of our concerns here. So I don't know how we then incorporate that once we've had a chance to look at it. But so that issue is just a concern that the accounting clarify the income and expenses that are allocated to the D-Space Alliance as opposed to the Marin County Fire Department, so that we can have a better review, because right now the numbers that we got were a combined spreadsheet. Does anybody have any questions? And Jenny, before I do that, do you want to add anything to that?
Nope, nothing to add. Thank you.
I can add that I have received that spreadsheet that we're talking about, and Marin County Fire has a very detailed spreadsheet with and it's tracked all through the years that they have been providing inspectors for the D-Space Alliance, or even before it was called the D-Space Alliance. And it's narrowed down by member agency that's receiving the services, how many inspections, what the rate of the inspections were. So that level of detail that we were talking about that meeting, I now have that spreadsheet.
I had a few questions, if I may.
Sure.
Okay.
Sure.
Yeah. So I went back to that document I wrote a while back, which was designed to be our roadmap for the way we're pursuing this year. And maybe, depending on how things go and we get the wording a little bit better, it might become more of a formalized document. But I went back to that to see if we covered all the bases. And there were a couple of questions I would suggest that as you continue to develop your report, you make sure that those are considered. And those were, let's see, personnel with duties beyond defensible space efforts should only be reimbursed for their wildfire protection activities. So this indicates that you've got some people doing 100%. That should probably be pretty simple to deal with, but you've got others who are doing 70% or 30% to 10%. So, what diligence has staff done to confirm that they are really doing those percentages of efforts? You don't have to answer that, but I think that should be answered within the document because that's a point of focus. Another point of focus was the question of administrative costs. There's this debate about the 20% or is it 10%? What's the total admin number?
For the admin costs?
Yeah.
10% of the 60%.
10 of the 60, right?
There you go.
But that's something you're still looking at. And there's a question as to whether there's any administration down below in the 20s, since we all talk this code these days. So with regards to this, are there any administrative costs, particularly with regards to the inspectors, which are doing only 10 to 30%? Is some of that administrative in its nature? Just a question I think that should be addressed. And then the final question that was in the document I wrote a while ago was, so if you come together as a group and the group gets the money, the question is, that's a combination of the underlying entities each having their 20%. And the question is the allocation of inspections consistent with the allocation of costs within each of the subgroups? So is everyone either not getting overburdened or underburdened, relative to the fact there are multiple entities involved. Again, it's a question that I think the document should respond to.
Well, I attempted to respond to that, at least in the San Rafael section, that Marinwood had fewer inspections this year
Right.
than their normal proportion, but it was because they had more the year before.
Yeah, I read that.
So
So the spent number is reflective of that.
Yeah.
Right, because you got 68 allocated and only 6 spent, only 10% of it spent. So the point is that you've seen the evidence that the actual spending is allocated proportionally to the effort which each of the entities received. Anyway, to consider
I
if you
think
can-
I have, but
Well, if you can make that, to make that statement, I think is important. It's relative to what the
Okay.
questions we're asking are. So anyway, so those are my thoughts on that one. Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions or discussion?
I have 2 questions.
Sure. Jennifer?
Am I going, Kingston?
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Sorry. Pat, first paragraph, the last word, comparable. I didn't follow the sentence. What's it not comparable with or to?
this is talking about San Rafael versus Marin County Fire, because Marin County Fire is a part of the D-Space Alliance, and they were only actually looking at Marin County Fire, not the D-Space Alliance as a whole. So, for example, just a lot of different ways in which the information, you can't compare one to the other because they're looking at different kinds of items.
Okay, I think I follow, and if I do, I'm gonna make a note and send it to you and see if I'm following.
Sure.
Thanks. And then second question is broader. Since we're like a year and a half or more behind in getting report out based on where the MWPA is, the last issue that just came up that Jennifer commented on, saying, and Mark continued on about, a problem that we are bringing up in this report has now been addressed or is being. First off, if it's already been addressed, but it was in a year after our report is coming out, how should we write the report? And then the other one is, like in this case, if it hasn't actually been fixed yet, but it's being addressed, should we comment on that in the report?
Good questions.
Jennifer?
Yes, Rebecca, you bring up something I've been thinking a lot about, that we probably have to figure out some sort of bounding of the time period that we're reviewing, and then regardless of what comes in after, we don't comment on it in the body of our report. If we want to make comments outside of the report, I suppose we could, but I think we're going to constantly be facing this because we're always going to be reporting on a period where a lot of development has happened, especially because things are developing so quickly here.
Yeah.
I agree. That's the only logical way to do it. If you're looking at a period, you comment on the period and it's full stop based on what you've seen for that period and not the subsequent period. The other thought I've got is that I thought that we said that at this point, we were only going to be looking at concept elements and not wording elements, because we were going to wait until all of it was put together and then our subcommittee, I think, was going to write, if I remember how we said that we were going to deal with
Correct.
things, and not wordsmith at this point, just
Oh.
conceptual, concerns, like what I did a minute ago in terms of make sure you cover these topics. So.
Gotcha. So Pat, forget that. I'm not going to send you anything.
That's okay.
Well, in defense of Rebecca's question, it is kind of interesting to the how we're looking at this, so.
Yeah, it's got to get figured out. Yeah, right.
And if I could just chime in on what window you're reporting on, I completely agree with, not that it counts, not that it matters, but I completely agree with where you guys are going, because I see this document and the documentation of the recommendations as you make as a public record that's holding the organizational accountable. And so if you just take my word for it that we made those changes, or you observe those changes in the next fiscal year, we don't necessarily have it documented in the public record.
And beyond that, as we progress as an organization, we will not be doing this 9 months after the end of the year, because you can do it during the year. That was one of the things we talked about
Yeah.
as we, tighten up our approach, that we can get some of this done even before the end of the fiscal year. Although we guess we don't make that this year, but we should be getting a lot closer, right?
All right.
Mark, you may be able to chime in on this since you do ICS stuff. When we did the after action report for COVID, because it was a 3-year long event, there were a lot of things in an improvement plan that were addressed before the report came out. So we still documented it and then kind of put a footnote on it, or, just some comment saying that it had been addressed prior to the report being released.
As long as there's a record, that's what's important for me, is that we have that record.
Additional discussion, questions? Public comment?
No hands raised at this time.
Any follow-up questions, anything? Okay, Core, Rebecca?
So,
Yes.
hold on, weren't we doing both sides? Because there's 2 documents, right? There's
We're
2,
still on defensible space?
there's 2 D-Space documents, right?
Right.
Yeah, we talked about both of them, I
Okay.
think.
All right, okay, because my comments are applicable to both. If you read the second one, I would ask the same questions. So.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, Rebecca, Core?
Yes, so, what you have is, edited after the comments that happened in the last meeting, that I took notes on. So my question is, in reading through it this time, did it read better? Is the tone still better? There were a few actual edits that I just copied and did. Questions, comments, anything else you want to have done? And I will also tell you that Spencer has some edits for me that are about wording. And I'm probably going to use them because they make it more clear. If I do that, I will bring it to next meeting. Anything anybody else wants to bring up this time?
Discussion? Questions?
Well, I agree. It does read much better. The only kind of question that remains in my mind, and I don't have a super strong view on this, is in the earlier conversation, we talked about some items that we consider relative to the dollar size of them, as to whether they would be formal or informal comments. Because we discussed the mechanism where the chair could, talk to the chairman of the board. So on the gardens, if I thought it was well positioned to say that, okay, these are small, but if they are evidence of something that is more endemic, then it's something worthy of. So I'm at some point, I guess we would have to decide whether we think it should be in document or as an informal manner.
I was listening to a meeting, I think it was ATC or operations. Where they were going, it was when everyone was doing their pitch. All right. And so at least two outfits said they were gonna do demonstration gardens,
Mhm.
And one of them said, yeah, one would be great, one, and I don't remember the name, said, but yeah, we want to harden the area around the fire station. And I went, if there's one place that should be hardened already, it's the fire station. So I guess our point is it's people are taking advantage of the situation and we want to make sure that everybody's straightforward.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay.
By the way, I went by that brand new Santa Rosa fire station right after the fire with some fire guys.
Yeah.
That burned to the ground. It was, all that was left was the front door of it. So
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
interesting.
I'm still looking for signs in front of the Summerfeld Community Center, so they're not there. Rebecca, do you have anything else?
No, except there aren't any signs in front of Nevada's either.
Um,
Oh, I will confirm that in the 24-25 work plan, we have already more demonstration gardens.
Mm.
I would question, not one, I would question, why are we continuing to do more demo gardens? But
Well,
so
I think the way you wrote it was very good. It really put it in a posture, and maybe the answer is that having heard all this, that yes, it should be a formal item and not an informal item. And,
Yeah.
you know, I didn't say I had a particular point of view on it. I just suggested that we needed to consider it. But I thought it was well positioned for either answer. So now I'm kind of leaning hard, like it should definitely be in the document. So.
all right. Any other questions? Public comment?
Not at this time.
Okay. Any follow-up discussion? None. Okay, item 9, committee members' request regarding future agenda items. Larry, we have you on, I'll bring that up with Mark. We'll see what we come up with. It'll be on the next agenda. Okay, yeah.
and I have a request.
Okay, Rebecca.
It'll be our June meeting, and I think we should get started in June on our next report. So I'm going to suggest that we put an agenda item, whether it's forming the next subcommittees or starting the discussion about, I don't know what the agenda item exactly should be, but I think we should start the next report.
Okay, we'll put that up for discussion. Okay,
And if I could offer, if I remember right, June should be when we nominate the next vice chair.
when is the next meeting? You remember?
It'll be June 9th, June 29. Does that sound right?
I know I changed some travel.
26, June 26th should be it.
I'll be here.
Yeah, June 26th. Yeah.
Okay, do we have any other adjustments, recommendations, future items? No?
Can I don't know how to put this as a future agenda item. About how to move this report along. We don't seem to be making a lot of progress.
Well, I don't know if I agree with that. You got first drafts of 2 out of 3 and, you know,
What, how long do you think it's gonna take you to,
I'll have it for the next meeting. I mean, yeah.
so next meeting, we may have something close to final?
Well, you'd have your core data for which a team will then write it, right? So it's all done consistently. I would submit that you'd probably want to go back to that earlier document because that frames each section and that's not in each section, but you could steal some of those words and heighten it up to make it a flowing thing. The hard part is to have the facts, right? And
Right.
observations, and then you need to move it along, but.
Well, we had one meeting canceled last month, so we missed that. Any other discussion? And I declare this meeting adjourned.
Thanks to everybody and
Thanks.
take care, Rebecca.
Thanks, bye.